Dungeons 3 offers players their latest chance to revel in being evil. The Dungeon Lord is back after his successes in Dungeons 1 and 2, and now he's ready to take over the rest of what isn't already his. The story begins with you, the Dungeon Lord, possessing a young elf named Thalia, who you hope to turn into your conduit for further world domination. The basic premise is, well, basic, and anyone who has played any of the previous games in the series might initially feel that not much has changed here. However, whilst this might not outwardly look like a huge leap forward for the series, it is most certainly one of the most fine-tuned and enjoyable games of its type. Of course, this being a Dungeon Keeper style game, you'll be spending a good deal of your time getting ready for attacks from the surface, as the humans send down all manner of classes to chip away at your horde. That being said, Dungeons 3 isn't a tower defense game. Traps are useful and numerous, and your orcs can do a good job of fighting back the intruders if directed well, but defense is not purely the focus in the way that it might be in, say, Orcs Must Die. Thinking ahead is always rewarded, and you'll need to build a varied army if you hope to survive and keep your dungeon intact. Most new players will probably start by delving deep into their dungeon in search of hidden rooms and gold. It's a matter of risk-reward, where the reward may be a handful of coins, and the risk may be uncovering a nest of giant spiders. Research is absolutely vital here. In the early hours of the game, I found myself throwing as much gold as I could into uncovering the rooms and traps that I figured would be of the most use to me. Gold will get you quite a bit, but you also need to build up your other currency, evil. This is earned through play on the surface world, as you're given ample opportunity to attack towns and groups of humans in RTS combat encounters reminiscent of the Warcraft games. But before you get into all of that, you'll of course need to develop basic accommodation for your orcs, and a means of feeding your growing army. Taking good care of your army is essential, as you need to be leveling them up to match the escalating difficulty of the missions and the strength of the attackers. This grants the RTS sections a certain intensity, as you have to decide between whether to play it safe and attack only when victory is certain, or to wait for longer, which then allows enemies to increase their own strength over time. Whilst the game does have tutorials, they don't necessarily teach you the things that you'd really need to know. So if you're new to the series, then be prepared to exercise patience when getting to grips with the game's myriad resource management, combat and crafting systems. I also found the controls to be more than a little awkward from time to time when playing on the PlayStation 4, but I imagine much of this clunkiness would be alleviated by using a mouse and keyboard, so it may just be a console-specific issue. There was also the odd glitch here and there, mostly audio issues such as sudden incredibly loud music during the cutscenes that drowned out all of the dialogue, or the RKI pathfinding being momentarily messed up. Besides these minor issues though, the team at Realm Forge Studios have done a decent job of bringing a fairly complicated title over to the consoles, but as usual, it's probably best to play games like this on PC if you can. In terms of tone, the game is decidedly tongue-in-cheek. The characters all work fine as joke dispensers, and it can be reasonably funny from time to time, but it does lack some of the sadistic edge of the original Dungeon Keeper. Thankfully, it rarely crosses into being annoyingly snarky or self-aware, and the writing retains a decent sense of fun throughout most of the lengthy campaign. However, your mileage will vary depending on your tolerance for copious amounts of pop culture gags and fourth wall breaks. It was a risky move having the game's sense of humour be such a big part of the package, to the point where it may run the risk of overshadowing the gameplay, but I feel that it works more often than it doesn't. Special props must also go to the narration and voice acting in general, as the majority is far better than you might expect. Overall, there's an awful lot to sink your teeth into and enjoy in Dungeons 3. With a lengthy campaign, multiplayer, skirmish mode and co-op campaign, you could potentially be getting dozens of hours from this package. It's a little rough around the edges here and there, and new players might find their first couple of hours with the game to be a bit of a chore, but once you're over that initial hurdle, the game becomes radically more enjoyable. I'd recommend it to anyone who is a Dungeon Keeper itch, or even those who struggle to get into the first couple of games in the series. Ultimately, Dungeons 3 is a perfect example of what steady, incremental improvements can do for a series, and I really look forward to whatever Realm Forge decide to do next, either with Dungeons or even a new IP.